What's up, movie fans? Guys, this video that you are watching right now is a side quest of mine. The main quest is ranking every Superman movie. That's a video that I've been working on recently. That's going to come out probably late next month after James Gunn's Superman movie comes out. And I'm pretty excited about that video, and to prepare for it, I have been re-watching every Superman movie. But while I was working on that video, I came up with another idea for a video, which is this one. That's the one you're watching right now. You see, while I was rewatching every Superman movie, I decided that I should watch the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2 for the first time. If you don't know what the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2 is, that means that you probably think that Zack Snyder's Justice League was kind of an original case of Warner Brothers, screwing over a director, but nope. No, it wasn't. Warner Brothers has been screwing over directors since the 70s. Back when Superman 2 was being filmed, Richard Donner, the guy who directed Superman 1, was originally supposed to be the director of that movie, but Warner Brothers got into some creative differences with him and ended up kicking him off the project and replacing him with Richard Lester, who directed Superman 2 and later went on to direct Superman 3. And so that's the theatrical cut of Superman 2. It is the movie that Richard Lester finished for Richard Donner. However, Warner Brothers eventually did the same exact thing that they did a few years ago with Zack Snyder and decided to go back to Richard Donner and have him finish his cut of the movie and release it. But there's one major difference in these two stories. With Zack Snyder, he really didn't have to wait that long to make his cut of the movie. Justice League came out in 2017. Warner Brothers let him release the Snyder cut in 2021. Just a 4-year wait. It was bad, but it wasn't a huge deal. With Richard Donner, they let him make the Donner cut 25 years after the theatrical cut of Superman 2 came out. So, Richard Donner didn't get as lucky as Zack Snyder did. He couldn't really go back and refilm the stuff that he hadn't gotten to film the first time around. This was 2006. At this point, Christopher Reeve had unfortunately passed away. All of the other actors had aged. There was no way to go back and reshoot stuff. So, the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2 is a very interesting movie because you're kind of watching a movie that is 75% complete. You have the basic story there, but it does feel like there's certain scenes that are missing. The ending had to cut some insane corners, which we will get to in this video, and they had to use unfinished test footage to finish some of the scenes in the movie. So, yeah, now today we have two different cuts of Superman 2, the theatrical cut and the Donner cut. I actually wanted to kind of talk about and compare these two different versions of the movie. As the title of this video kind of implies, Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut, kind of made me sad because I think this movie had an insane amount of missed potential. Let's get into it, starting with Superman 2, the theatrical cut. Now, here's the other big difference between Richard Donner's story and Zack Snyder. In the case of Zack Snyder, I hate the theatrical cut of Justice League, and I love the Snyder cut. In the case of Superman 2, I actually like both versions of this movie. Superman 2, the theatrical cut, is a pretty good movie. I won't tell you whether I think it's better than the first movie or anything like that, because we're going to save that for my ranking video that I am going to do in a month. But I think that this movie continues the story of the first movie perfectly. At the heart of Superman 2, you have the relationship between Clark and Lois, which this movie goes into a lot. It is the emotional core of the film, and I think that they did a very good job with it. I think that Clark and Lois have so much more chemistry in Superman 2 than they did in the first movie. Like, they had chemistry in Superman 1, but in this movie, I just think that their relationship and their dynamic is so much fun. They have a lot of really great scenes together, whether it be them talking about Lois's obsession with freshly squeezed orange juice, or the scene where they're sent on an assignment together in Niagara Falls to investigate into this honeymoon hotel place that's kind of defrauding people. Like, they just have a lot of really great sequences together. I think Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder nailed their relationship. So yeah, that's kind of one of my favorite parts of this movie. And in my opinion, this movie's entire plot line where Lois basically realizes that Clark is Superman and tries to get Clark to admit it is absolutely hilarious. There's an entire sequence in the movie where Lois jumps into a river in Niagara Falls, and then Clark has to try and save her while also not revealing that he's Superman, and so he's just kind of chasing her, acting like a complete buffoon. I think that that is the funniest scene in any Superman movie. That scene was just absolutely hilarious. Yeah, Clark and Lois's relationship is great, and then eventually, spoilers, I'm going to be going into the complete plot of both cuts of this movie. Eventually, Clark reveals that he is Superman to Lois, and from there, I also really like their relationship after that reveal. As they go back to the Fortress of Solitude, they have this nice conversation where they're having dinner together, and Superman opens up a little bit more to Lois. Just a really great central dynamic at the center of this movie. This movie also has some subplots in its first half with its villains, as you have Lex Luthor kind of having this whole subplot where he breaks out of prison and then he tries to find the Fortress of Solitude. I thought that that plotline was a ton of fun. Gene Hackman is just an absolutely amazing Lex Luthor. He's just a super goofy, fun villain, as always, in this movie. But he's not the main villain of this movie. That goes to General Zod. And here's a hot take that I have. I actually think that Zod, Terrence Stamp's General Zod, is a little bit of a better villain than Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor is a ton of fun in the Christopher Reeve film series, but I think that Zod is just a lot more threatening in this film, especially as you have this entire sequence in the first half of the movie where him and his henchmen go to the moon and just kill a bunch of astronauts for no reason. Then they go to Earth and start terrorizing this town for no reason. Zod forces the president into submission, and then him and his henchmen do the worst thing of all. They carve their own faces into Mount Rushmore. Okay, admittedly, that part is kind of goofy, and that's like the kind of antics that Gene Hackman's Lex would get up to, but it's pretty funny, so I'll give it a pass. You get into the second half of this movie as you have Superman's fight with Zod in the city. Like, yeah, I just think that this movie has a lot of really great things about it. I think the theatrical cut of Superman 2 is a great movie. With that being said, it does have some problems. I have two major problems with the theatrical cut of this movie. First off, and this is not a problem with this movie specifically, this is a problem with the entire Christopher Reeve film series, in my opinion. I don't like when these movies decide that Superman can do things that he should not be able to do. I don't like it when he flies around the earth and reverses time in Superman 1. I don't like it when he uses telekinesis to fix the Great Wall of China in Superman 4. But in my opinion, this movie is the worst culprit of this because Superman's powers have no consistency in this film. He can use telekinesis, he can clone himself, he can teleport, he can rip the S off of his chest and turn it into some sort of plastic blanket thing, and worst of all, he can erase people's memories by kissing them, which is just so dumb. And by the way, I would also like to mention, in Superman 4, Clark reveals that he's Superman to Lois again, and then he kisses her and erases her memory again. And I just have to ask, like, how many times has he done this? How many times has he emotionally manipulated and brainwashed this poor woman? What the heck, Clark? That's kind of messed up. Anyway, yeah, I just really don't like when these movies don't have consistency to Superman's powers. But at the end of the day, that's not a huge deal. Like, if somebody was watching this movie and they didn't know who Superman is, they're not gonna care when he can suddenly teleport, okay? So that's not a huge deal. The biggest problem with Superman 2, the theatrical cut, in my opinion, is that Superman's character arc feels wildly rushed by in this film. One thing that I'm gonna mention is that they did not get Marlon Brando back for the theatrical cut of Superman 2. I guess he refused to come back for this movie because he was more of a friend of Richard Donner's. He's in the Donner cut, which we'll get to. But yeah, he's not in this movie. So in this movie, instead of Clark seeing his father as a hologram, he sees his mother. Which, like, that's not a huge deal. What is a huge deal is when Clark makes the big decision that this entire movie's story hinges on, giving up his powers to be with Lois. Superman's mom sucks at her job. She's supposed to try and convince Clark not to do this by telling him that this is irreversible and he has a responsibility to mankind, and she barely even tries. She's just like, no, Clark, please don't do it. And Clark is like, but I want to. And she's like, okay, fine, do it. Like, it doesn't feel like there's any weight to this decision at all. And once again, it's the decision that the entire movie hinges on. Then after that, you get the admittedly really, really good scene where Clark gets bullied in a diner, and then he sees on the news that Zod has come to Earth, and he realizes that he made the wrong decision. So then he goes back to the Fortress of Solitude to get his powers back. Just a reminder, Superman's mom told him that this decision was irreversible. So obviously, Clark immediately manages to reverse it with no effort whatsoever. He just finds like a green crystal on the ground and he touches it or whatever, and suddenly he has his powers back. I guess getting his powers back was super easy, barely an inconvenience. So, like, it's really, really dumb in my opinion, because that's Clark's entire character arc in this film. Him grappling over whether living a life with Lois is worth giving up his powers for. And at the end of the day, the decision barely matters to this movie's story. So, Superman 2, the theatrical cut, is a very fun movie. I think it gets a lot of things right. But when it comes to that major aspect, I think this movie failed a lot. So I think Superman 2 is still a great movie. I would give it an 8 out of 10, but that's still a pretty big problem that prevents it from being a 9 or potentially a 10 out of 10. So now let's talk about Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut. Now, full disclosure, when I started this movie, like, the first half of it, I did not like. Like, I thought halfway through this movie, man, I appreciate that they gave Richard Donner the chance to finish his movie, but this isn't very good. Like, in the first half of this movie, it just feels like there's a lot of scenes that are missing. It feels like it's going through the motions of the story. So, like, you still get this entire plot line about Clark and Lois going on this mission to Niagara Falls to stop this a honeymoon hotel from defrauding people or whatever. And you still get that entire, like, sequence where Lois is trying to get Clark to admit that he's Superman, but it just isn't as fun as it is in the theatrical cut. A lot of Superman and Lois's interactions that I really liked in the theatrical cut are just missing here, like the orange juice scene or the scene where they're in their room in the honeymoon hotel, kind of talking about their differing perspectives on this mission. Like, all of that is kind of gone. And so in this movie, they really don't feel like friends like they did in the theatrical cut. They just feel like vaguely acquainted colleagues, and that really just took a lot of the steam out of the movie, in my opinion. You have the subplots with Lex and Zod, which I also didn't really think were done that well in the first half of this movie. The Lex stuff in this movie just goes on for way too long. In the theatrical cut, a lot of his scenes were kind of quick, and as a result, I thought they were more funny that way. This movie kind of drags them out more, and I did not like that. I didn't think they were as funny. And with Zod, there's a lot of stuff missing for him, where you still have the sequence where he kills the astronauts. You have an added sequence that I actually really liked, where he kills a bunch of soldiers that are guarding the White House, and at one point he grabs a machine gun and starts shooting people with it, with like this creepy grin on his face, which I think is probably the scariest thing he does in either cut of this movie. But they cut out the entire sequence where he's terrorizing the one town, and I thought that they should have left that in. I thought that that did a lot to make me more threatened by Zod and his henchmen, and worst of all, they cut out the scene where they carve their own faces into Mount Rushmore. It's just replaced by a boring scene of them, like, blowing up the Washington Monument or whatever. Cowards. Have them carve their faces into Mount Rushmore again. But yeah, so there's a lot of things in the first half of Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut, that I really didn't care for. There is one scene that I did really like in the first half of this movie, And that is the scene where Lois tricks Clark into revealing he's Superman. In the theatrical cut, I thought that scene actually happened in a very lame, uneventful way, where Clark just trips into a fire and he doesn't get burned. So then Lois is like, "Ha, you are Superman." And that's just kind of lame. In this cut of the movie, Lois shoots him. I'm not making that up. She pulls out a gun, shoots Clark. It bounces off of Clark, so then Clark is forced to reveal that he's Superman. And then Lois reveals that the bullets were blanks the whole time, which I think is just an absolutely awesome Lois Lane moment where she really tricked him there, and I thought that was really funny. But I will not forgive them for replacing the scene where Lois jumps into a river with a scene where Lois jumps off of a building and Clark has to use his super breath to save her. Like, that's funny, but it's nowhere near as funny as the theatrical cut version of that scene where Clark is just chasing her down the river. That was way funnier in the original cut, in my opinion. And then they also just cut out a lot of scenes after Clark reveals he's Superman where they're in the Fortress of Solitude together. So, yeah, for the first, hour, I was not into the Richard Donner cut. And then, suddenly, in the second half, this movie locked in. I think the second half of this movie is perfect. And I mean perfect. It all starts in the scene where Clark gives up his powers. Once again, I really did not like that scene in the theatrical cut of the movie. I thought that it was super boring, with Clark's mother barely even trying to convince him not to give up his powers. In this movie, they got Marlon Brando back, and the scene with him trying to convince Clark not to give up his powers is so much better. Leaps and bounds better, where the two of them actually get into an argument over it. Christopher Reeves and Marlon Brando's acting in this scene is absolutely insane, as Marlon Brando tries to convince him that he is making a terrible mistake. And Clark opens up about how he feels like it's unfair that he doesn't get to live a normal life because of the burden that's been placed on him. And it's such a good, emotionally impactful scene. And as soon as that scene hit, I was just blown away. I thought that was amazing. And then you get the entire sequence in the diner, which remains exactly the same in this cut of the movie. But I think that it is way better this time around, because now it feels like you're actually seeing the consequences of Clark's choice, the choice that the entire movie hinges on. So I thought it was way more effective. And then Clark returns to the Fortress of Solitude. In this cut of the movie, does he just touch a green crystal and his powers come back? No, it's not that easy in this cut. In this cut, he begs Jor-El for his powers back, and Jor-El tells him that he can get his powers back, but it's going to come at a price. And that price is Jor-El is going to disappear forever. Clark can never talk to him or consult him again. All of the knowledge of Krypton will be lost forever if Clark gets his powers back. But Clark has to get them back to stop Zod. In this cut of the movie, the story has real consequences. And as a result, I think that scene is also so much more powerful than the version of that scene in the original cut. Once again, Christopher Reeve goes all out in this scene. Like, this is the best Christopher Reeve performance that I have ever seen in film. Granted, I haven't actually seen much of him outside of the Superman movies, but seriously, he did such a great job in this movie. And so then you get the final battle in the city, and then the final confrontation in the Fortress of Solitude, most of which is the same, but with one major difference. The big fight between Superman, Zod, and Zod's henchmen, where Superman uses a bunch of ridiculous powers, that's all cut. They just cut right to the chase where Superman tricks Zod into giving up his powers. None of the other stuff is there, and that's a good thing. Now, also, I think that in the second half of this movie, Lex is way funnier than he is in the first half of the movie. Like, I already thought in both cuts of this movie, it was very, very funny that Lex's entire goal is just to try and become the ruler of Australia because he realizes that Zod is going to take over the rest of the world, so he just wants to take what he can get. But the addition in the Donner cut where he also tries to get Cuba towards the end of the movie too, that just makes it even funnier. That's just comedy gold. I love everything that happens with Lex in the second half of this movie. And so, yeah, you get an entire scene at the end of the movie where Clark kind of realizes the Fortress of Solitude doesn't have a point anymore now that he can't talk to Jor-El, so he uses his heat vision to destroy it. And then you get this entire really touching conversation between Clark and Lois, where Lois kind of accepts that she can't be with Clark, and it's a really heartbreaking scene. And yeah, just the entire second half of this movie is kind of perfect. Until the very end. The very end stumbles a little bit. Like I said earlier in the video, there was a lot of stuff that Richard Donner wasn't able to shoot or finished shooting. So this cut of the movie is forced to go with a terrible ending where Clark just reverses time again. Like, he did it at the end of the first movie. This movie, same solution. He flies into space, flies around the Earth, time reverses. Bam, he never even revealed that he was Superman to Lois. I really hate that ending. But at the end of the day, it's not that big of a deal. Like, Richard Donner probably would have shot a different ending. It's not really his fault. It just kind of sucks that that's the ending this version of the movie was forced to go with. So, overall, that's what really bums me out about these two different cuts of the movies. You might have noticed I basically have the same exact amount of positives and negatives for both of them. Like, they're great movies. I would give them both 8 out of 10s. But if you took the dramatic weight of the Donner cut and put it in the theatrical cut of Superman 2, that movie would be a 10 out of 10. And similarly, if you took some of the more comedic, fun aspects of the theatrical cut of Superman 2 and you put them into the Donner cut, that would also be a 10 out of 10. I am convinced that a perfect cut of Superman 2 would be one of the greatest superhero movies ever made. But instead, we're left with two cuts that I think are flawed versions of something that could have been incredible. And yeah, that's why I wanted to make this video. I think that after watching the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2, Superman 2 is a film with an insane amount of missed potential. And I just really wish that we could have gotten the finished version of Richard Donner's vision, because that probably would have been the best version of this movie. And that's kind of the moral of this story. Warner Brothers sucks. One day, WB, I hope you learn to stop screwing over directors and just let them make the movies that they want to make. Because if there's anything we've learned over the past, 40 years, it's that they're better at making movies than you are. So, yeah, there you go. That's kind of my thoughts on both versions of Superman 2. Because I have such similar thoughts on both of these movies, where I think they're both great, but they're both very flawed, I'm probably actually not going to rank them separately on my Superman movie ranking. I genuinely don't even know which cut of the movie I prefer, so when I do my Superman movie ranking in a month, I'm just going to rank them both together as Superman 2. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe. Comment down below which cut of Superman 2 do you prefer if you've seen both of them. And see ya, movie fans.